if you work hard and you genuinely care, people roll out the red carpet for
Sure.
you and want to show you everything that they know and how to be successful. And that really for me was fantastic in that, if you can find a maintenance supervisor or mod superintendent maybe early in the day for a few minutes and before they get really started, and they can take a few minutes and teach you something and you can show them that you really want to learn, then some really great things start to happen. And I was pretty fortunate to over the years align myself with a lot of really great folks, and
Well,
that's really, I guess, the key, at least for my career, and especially in the early innings.
hello, and welcome to the Elevator Careers Podcast, sponsored by the Allred Group. I am your host, Matt Allred. In this podcast, we talk to the people whose lives and careers are dedicated to the vertical transportation industry to inform and share lessons learned, building upon the foundation of those who have gone before to inspire the next generation of elevator careers. Today, our guest is Ed Stachowiak, Chief Operating Officer at Axxiom Elevator. Ed started his career as a sales rep with Otis Elevator in Syracuse, New York, where he learned and grew rapidly. In 2023, Ed became one of the founders of Axiom Elevator with a vision to become the elevator service provider of choice. Ed believes personal and business growth is not easy. It takes a lot of courage to have honest and open conversations, but it's essential to see your blind spots and grow effectively. This is part one of the interview with Ed. Today we will discuss his early career. In part two, we'll be discussing the challenges and learnings of starting a new business. So Ed, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. I'm excited to be able to talk today. It's a pleasure, and especially to kind of dig a little deeper into getting to know you, and would love to start with just your career and how did you come to the elevator industry?
Yeah, it wasn't on the short list of what I wanted to be when I was a little kid, and I didn't have a family member in the industry. Uh, the way that I entered the elevator industry was straight out of college. So I was recruited straight out of school. It was back when UTC and Otis were
Okay.
collectively together before they decoupled, and was recruited straight out of school, and really saw a company that was a lot like a family in the branch operating structure. And then
Where were you going to
I
school, if I
visited
may?
Clarkson University in upstate New York.
Okay. So they just came on campus and
Yeah.
say, "Hey, we want to interview some of your best and brightest," and there
I
you
don't know
go.
about that part. I think I might have snuck my way into the interview process, but I had a really neat opportunity to interview with two gentlemen, Jim O'Reilly and Tim Reedy. And I think interview started at 8, and I might have snuck in at 7:30 before someone and weaseled my way in for an interview. But I guess the rest was history from that day forward. But those
What
two
was it?
gentlemen were responsible, I guess, for hiring me.
What was it that captured your attention, especially going from like zero interest, zero knowledge of what even is this? What was it that kind of sparked that fire?
Yeah, I think I probably didn't know it at the time, uh, but I really enjoyed learning about the culture and the people that they had on campus. And there was a significant contingency of folks that had joined the company or really had joined UTC
Or
in various capacities. And so that was obviously very exciting. And I guess I didn't know, obviously, at the time that it would be a career decision. I was looking, I guess, at that point for a job, but
sure.
I think that was really the first piece. The second thing I think that I researched and I guess found through that research, and you have to remember back then research was a little bit different. This was, I'm gonna date myself a little bit, but it wasn't, while Google was, in its early infancies, information wasn't as readily available. So you actually had to
Right.
spend time hunting for it. But I think, in researching the company, you could see that their financial performance had been strong. And in making a transition out of school and into a job in an industry, it made a lot of sense to go someplace that, was doing a good job. So I think those were probably the two things that were steering me that direction. I had no idea, what I was getting myself into, I guess, but that's
Right,
how
right.
it
Just
kicked
looking for a
off.
first job, let alone,
Yeah.
maybe I'll do this for 2 years and then I'll find something else, right?
Yeah, I guess I never, I guess I never looked at it as being short term or long term. I just jumped into it, and then I don't know, it took off from there.
What was it that kind of clicked for you that made you start saying, "Oh my gosh, this is pretty cool. I can keep doing this."
Yeah, I think the first thing was I saw the folks around me, their careers grow and blossom, and they were around the country, maybe a year or two ahead of me, so to speak,
Okay,
in kind
sure.
of their tenure in various capacities, and seeing them take on roles of increased responsibility and be responsible for managing whether it's a small P&L or an operation or uh, maybe even just a project or two, and that was really exciting.
Yeah,
Uh, and I think the other piece was, our industry has a culture, and I'm sure you've heard this a million times, but if you work hard and you genuinely care, people roll out the red carpet for
sure.
you and want to show you everything that they know and how to be successful. And that really for me was fantastic in that, if you can find a maintenance supervisor or mod superintendent maybe early in the day for a few minutes and before they get really started, and they can take a few minutes and teach you something and you can show them that you really want to learn, then some really great things start to happen. And I was pretty fortunate to over the years align myself with a lot of really great folks, and
Who,
that's really, I guess, the key, at least from my career, and especially in the early innings.
yeah, yeah. Who were some of those folks that really you felt like took an interest in you, your
Yeah,
career, and said,
yeah.
"Hey, I want to invest some time in you."
Mhm. Yeah, it's interesting. So one of those people is actually currently our CEO of Axiom today, Jeremy Metzger,
Cool.
who I've, I guess, reported to directly or indirectly 4 times throughout my career. So certainly a known quantity. I think we've known each other 17 or 18 years.
Wow.
So as
Yeah.
we kicked off Axiom and really we're building up this company from the ground up, there was a really short learning curve, I guess, collectively between the two of us, how to work together. But so he was certainly one of them. And then I would say uh, there's a few other folks. Chris Tedeschi, namely, is one of them. I still talk to him, actually, even as recent as text messages the other day.
Wow.
And I think what you find is in a small branch operating structure, you become, in a weird way, almost like family, which
Right.
is really not the norm, especially in the industry today, as it was really back then. I think you can create that culture still, but it's a lot more difficult in, call it, the highly matrixed organizations, especially the Fortune 50 or Fortune 100.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it seems like you came in at a good time with a
Mhm.
good group of people and
Yeah,
really could see the upward movement. And it's like, oh my
yeah,
gosh, that dude's only been at it for 2 years. He's two
yeah.
years ahead of me. So in 2 years, I could be doing that.
It's wild, yeah. I mean, I think that, that certainly was the model and is the model for the most part in a lot of the majors is, continue to take on roles of increased responsibility and perhaps even relocate if it makes sense for, call it, all parties involved. But
Right.
it's a little bit different, I think, today than it was then. In the post-COVID world, it's obviously changed
True.
the way people are
Absolutely.
looking at their employer and the employer-employee relationship.
Sure. Sure. What were some of your initial challenges or maybe just like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I can figure this out or, did you feel like you hit any of those
I mean,
obstacles,
all of the
walls?
above. Yeah, it's so. I think for anybody entering the industry, the product knowledge component and of what we physically do in the field can be really daunting. And there's really no easy way around it other than just rolling up your sleeves and diving in. And I was pretty fortunate to spend a lot of my early career just observing and watching, and was given that opportunity to see how you do everything from uh, adjust. I'm trying to think of something that I saw that was pretty interesting. Oh, a linear selector to, watching somebody do a rope job to how you balance a cab. I mean, just, watching poetry in motion, if you will, just doing
Wow.
our everyday stuff. And, you know, without access to that, it becomes very difficult to do, I think, a couple things. One, articulate to a customer, perhaps, the nuance and how difficult it is, inherently difficult and inherently dangerous, what we do on a day-to-day basis really
Right.
is. I think that's the
Right.
first thing. The second thing is, until you're sitting there, or perhaps even if you ever had an opportunity to work in the field, um, understand the work that is actually occurring. It's very difficult to appreciate it and very difficult to understand the challenges that our people throughout our industry face on a day-to-day basis. And
Right.
without that, I think it's incredibly difficult to, in at least a future state or a role further on down your career, be responsible for those folks if you don't truly understand how difficult it is.
Yeah.
And so I was very lucky to have that opportunity early on in my career and gain that appreciation for how difficult our business is, uh,
Well,
on
yeah,
a
it's
daily
huge,
basis.
especially yeah, if you're leading an ops team, for example, maybe you're running a branch or something, and I know early in my career there was always this issue, ops and sales. Well, sales is over promising and we can't do that. And they keep selling it, like we can. And,
Hmm.
not that that ever happens in this industry, but I think being able to understand that and appreciate it, what your team actually can do
Yeah.
makes a huge difference.
Yeah. It's interesting. You bring up kind of that classic manufacturing bottleneck and subsequent bullwhip effect. And you see it in really every facet of our business. And really the goal, especially as a leader, is to push that bottleneck as far down the line as you can until it boomerangs back around to the front end of the sales process and then continue to do that. I think the challenge is most people don't understand that that's just an inherent part of growth or
Sure.
inherent part of the business. And so, you know, as you're navigating call it the day to day, I think helping the team around you really understand what it is that is happening, call it in the business, around the business, and in the day to day becomes mission critical. Because I genuinely still to this day don't believe people wake up and say, I'm going to do a really terrible job at work today. It just doesn't happen. I mean, I think people genuinely care. They want to win. They want to be a part of a high performing team. They believe that they have a ton to contribute, and it's unlocking that talent. And I think the first part of doing that is making sure people understand exactly what it is that enables them to be successful and enables the team to be successful and what those roadblocks are, and that this thing happened or this thing is happening to us, but it's as a byproduct of these other three things. And I think oftentimes it's hard to see those levers being pulled kind of behind the scenes when you're in the day-to-day trenches.
Sure.
And
Sure.
I think you have to have a little faith in the process, regardless of where you are from which seat you're sitting in, and that, the people around you genuinely are doing the same that you are and wanting to be successful. And you have to have a little faith in your team.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're all in this together, and yeah, it's going to
Yeah.
hurt sometimes, and let's just, get through it and
Yeah.
then make it happen again. And hopefully you'll do better next time and
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
things. Yeah, that's cool. Um, what would you say is the single greatest thing, or one of the greatest things you've learned throughout your career?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, there's probably a zillion of those I could share. I guess I wouldn't even say it's industry related. I think it's probably just more a general, call it thought and life lesson, but um, and I wouldn't even call it a trick per se. I think it's just the proper way to lead a team or to be a part of a team is um, create a culture and treat people in a manner that creates an environment where people do the things that need to be done, not because you're telling them to do it or because they have to, but more so because they don't want to let you down. And I think that is the difference between companies being good and companies being great. And, I think as a part of that, what you find is, people will forget things that you say, but they'll never forget the way you make them feel. And in our industry, we have people from all different backgrounds and all different educations
Right.
and who are on various stages in their career and in their life. And so, to thread a needle on whatever it is, making a business plan, getting an elevator back in service, figuring out the right way to handle a certain situation, whether it's in the office or in the field, uh, is inherently difficult. And I think at the end of the day, those principles, are genuine and are the reason why, great companies continue to thrive. But there's no shortage of opportunities to mess those situations up, right? So on a day-to-day
Right.
basis, you're always trying to get better. And I think as a part of that process, you have to be a little vulnerable. You have to be a little vulnerable with those around you. And you also have to be a little vulnerable and look yourself in the mirror and say, wow, maybe I could have handled that one a little bit differently, or, and share that with the team. Because I think everybody, especially when you're working in a tight knit group and, you're relying on sales, are relying on operations are relying on sales, and
Right.
call it all and all together, those things become mission critical to the success of the branch operation and to ultimately to the business.
Well, I think it goes back to what you said a few minutes ago, with it. Nobody wakes up and says, I'm going to do a horrible job, right? Everybody wants to come through for their team. Everybody
Yeah.
wants to succeed and have the team succeed. And so knowing that the leader, like you said, makes you feel like, hey, he values me as an
Mhm.
individual and I trust him. And there's this bond here that I want to maintain that, right? I'm
Yeah.
not,
Yeah.
and if I screw something up, then I'm just going to come forward and say, hey, I totally screwed something up.
Yeah.
versus trying to hide it or trying to pretend it didn't happen or blame somebody else or because, hey, I can trust this leader. So I think that's huge.
Yeah, it's really hard to do. I mean, if you've just entered an organization or you're, you know, maybe early in your career, it's hard to come to the forefront and say, I think I messed this one up. What should I do? Or here's how I'm planning on handling. I mean, it's usually the last thing you want to do. You want to move really fast and try and fix something so that nobody finds out maybe. But that's probably the worst thing you can do because there's so much, wealth of knowledge that could probably help you do it differently and really
Yeah.
learn from it. And I think
Yeah. It
that's one of
reminds,
the things that in our industry right now is really important is, are we taking the time to really go and teach and coach all of the apprentices that are in our industry right now, that are joining our industry, to the degree that, perhaps folks did it for us. And, it's a challenge, it's a balancing act, and across the industries, I think you're seeing, the independent elevator community really thrive by leveraging that as an opportunity. And candidly, I think the folks that have joined independent elevator companies are getting a quote unquote better education from, start to finish because they're able to see a lot of different vintages of equipment and get experience and exposure to all different lines and maybe not work all in, one segment of the business, whether it's construction or mod versus, perhaps others would.
yeah. What do you think it is that some companies may have lost sight of? I mean, you're talking about, just making sure that you're mentoring and teaching and where does that get lost, I guess?
I don't know if it's necessarily lost. I think it's just as businesses move from, call it, one phase to the next, if you go from true growth or startup into kind of that middle phase versus, prior to going into, call it, that larger or, almost major or matrixed organization, you're just in different phases. And as you transition from one to the next, you start to see more and more specialization and, silos in certain key portions of the business. Just because it's so large, you don't have a choice. So I don't think
Right.
it's that anybody's, quote unquote, lost anything. I just think it's very difficult to manage a business of size and scale without specialization.
True.
And,
True. Well,
that's
and
just very
growth,
different.
yeah, a lot of growing pains and when you're in that, it's easy to take your eye off one ball and focus on another ball because hey, they're all flying pretty fast.
Yeah. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, what so I want to kind of I guess ask as we want to what I'd like to do is kind of wrap up just part one around your career by asking what
Yeah.
advice would you give to somebody who's new to this industry?
Yeah. So when you take a step back and kind of look at my career, you know, I don't know if gone are the days, and maybe I'm going to make myself sound a little old, Matt. I don't feel old, but maybe gone are the days where people join an organization, say, I can see myself here for my entire career. I can see myself here for 20 years or
Right.
whatever it may be. And so back when my career started, and the question was, how do you get real world experience without perhaps leaving an organization? And the balance of, there's a big wide world out there, but I really like where I'm at. How do I manage both of those uh, without having to potentially leave? And so the reason why I tell that story, and it's something that actually our CEO Jeremy and I had many conversations about, and it's one of the reasons why I really focused on both real world experience and education, and took the opportunity to go and seek out multiple degrees and specializations and consulting work and other opportunities to kind of gain that worldly experience without having to really change roles or leave the organization. But I think it's to continue to have that thirst for knowledge, to be open and honest and candid with the folks around you, like we've discussed earlier about the things that you would love to be able to accomplish and do, and put plans in place in order to do it. Um, it's like that age-old question, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I'm still saying I'm not sure, but I'll let you know when I
Right.
get there. And
Right.
some would say, okay, well, you've already done a lot, when's enough is enough? And the answer is, I don't know. I feel like I'm still just getting started. And I think that's that, thirst for knowledge and continuing to be inquisitive and really trying to look at every opportunity to learn. That I think is probably the major key for this industry. And I know we'll talk a lot more kind of later on perhaps about the business and the industry, but the pace of innovation and change in technology is happening so quickly.
Right.
that if you aren't looking at every opportunity as a learning opportunity, it's going to be really difficult to keep up as we go forward. We as a group of elevator folks for the longest time said, oh, geez, we're going from relay logic to microprocessor, like the world's getting flipped upside down. And
Right.
we're going to look back in the not so distant future and say that was nothing compared to what we're about to transition into from, everything from the cellular technology coupled with AGI and everything else that's coming down the pipeline from a technology perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I'm hearing from you is take every opportunity, because you never know where it's going to lead you. If you
Yeah.
take those opportunities there to learn, to grow, to develop,
Yeah.
what you're going to find is there's a whole bunch of new opportunities that you could not have seen from the other side that are now
Yeah, it's
presented.
the age-old quote, like the harder you work, the luckier you get. And it's kind of
Right.
right along those lines. But I think you have to work hard and you have to work smart and really continue to push yourself. It's really easy to get comfortable in really any role,
Right.
especially I think in our industry, and that inquisitive thought and wanting to learn more and pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone. It's really important. And I guess really the way I describe it is you're working, call it for the business, but you also want to be working on yourself and continuing to improve your core skill set. And I think that's super important, especially as, you kind of traverse your career and get more and more opportunities. And people always are perhaps a little nervous or scared to take a lateral role. And I'm sure you have a lot of conversations with
Sure.
people about their career path and how they navigate it. But in order to be a truly effective leader, you have to have a really strong basic fund of knowledge around really all key disciplinary topics within,
Right.
call it the average day in the life of the business. And so you can't just know a whole bunch about operations or sales or maybe finance if you truly want to be a leader and represent, either a significant P&L or a business, because at the end of the day, you're going to be making decisions that have wide sweeping ramifications, and you have to really understand how that's going to impact the business and kind of all of those areas or arenas. So I think that's one of the arguments or the use cases for why it's
Right.
really important to get that exposure. But it's really hard to do that when you're sitting there saying, geez, I could continue to do this for a long, long time, and there's these opportunities staring ahead of me. I don't know if I want to take a step sideways, or geez, this kind of feels backwards. Is this the right thing to do?
Right.
But I think you always have to calm yourself down and say you got plenty of time to figure it out. There's no rush.
Right.
Uh, you know,
Yep. Absolutely. Thank you. Awesome.
yeah.
Ed, thank you so much for being with me today.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. It was fun.
Thank you. I appreciate it, and I wish you the best as you continue to build the business.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Elevator Careers Podcast, sponsored by the Allred Group, a leader in elevator industry recruiting. You can check us out online at elevatorcareers.net. Please subscribe, and until next time, stay safe.